The job of Yosemite Park Ranger isn't what most people imagine. A lot of people picture us as law enforcement types, handing out tickets and enforcing park rules, when really that's a very niche aspect of it. Mostly we're just here to assist you. Handing out maps, not speeding tickets, and giving people directions to the best views or to ideal camping locations. We remind people about safety and weather conditions from day to day. But the main thing we do, and this is more vital than people realize, is that we're just here in case anyone gets lost or hurt. We deal with a lot of belligerent people who like to think the park is their personal playground where they can do whatever they want. It's my job to remind them to follow the rules, to dispose of their trash properly, to pick up after their dog, and to clip its leash back on while walking the trails. Some people take this as a personal assault on their freedoms, when really I'm just looking out for the safety of other visitors, like cyclists and horseback riders who share the paths. Dogs can be unpredictable and can misbehave on trails, and we have to look out for everyone. Still, I don't often get a lot of positive feedback for enforcing the rules. Nobody likes to be told what to do, trust me, I get it. Every once in a while something interesting happens to break up the boredom and monotony of the job. Last summer I was walking around at night, doing a patrol of the campgrounds, when I saw something rustling around in the bushes. A guy came crawling out, dressed in a furry dog costume. I asked him if he was okay, and he just barked happily, then crawled away in the opposite direction. Shortly afterwards, I saw him chasing another person who was dressed as a cat, a woman who went scampering away and hid beneath a camper van, laughing excitedly and making purring sounds, licking the dirt from her fur pants with a long tongue. She saw me watching and clawed the air in front of her face, hissing territorially. It's not how I would choose to spend my Friday nights, but I'm not one to judge. By far the most interesting thing which has ever happened to me at Yosemite occurred last summer. And it wasn't just interesting, it was utterly terrifying. Every night when I fall asleep I have nightmares about that day. Every time I close my eyes, I picture those dark tunnels in the rock face. It all started when someone called in a report saying they were out on the Cathedral Lake Trail when their brother went missing. The pair had been out hiking when they got separated somehow. At first we thought it was just a routine mishap. People go missing in Yosemite all the time. It's no big deal in most cases, since usually the missing parties are found quickly enough. Half the time alcohol is involved, and I have to remind people to pace themselves if they indulge while camping. But every once in a while those missing people don't turn up, and we have to dispatch much larger search parties. In this case I went out on my own at first, heading to where the man had called us from. I drove out on an ATV, since it was a 16-mile round trip. When I got there, the guy looked frantic. He ran over to me and started speaking way too fast to understand. I told him to slow down and just give me the facts. It's important to stay calm in these types of situations. The guy took a deep breath and let it out. Then he started talking again, a bit slower this time. We were walking on the trail. He was right beside me. Then I turned around to look at the lake, and when I looked back he was gone. Just gone. I tried to get a sense if the man had been drinking or doing drugs. It's not that I'm trying to assume the worst in people, but we have to think of these types of things. The simplest explanation is usually the right one after all, and it was much easier to imagine the two brothers taking sips from a Mickey and one of them getting separated and lost than to imagine one of them being abducted by aliens or taken in a very selective rapture. Slow down for a second. Take some deep breaths. What's your name? Let's start with that. Greg, he said, his face turning a shade less purple as he began to inhale air with trembling breaths in and out. Okay, Greg. I took out my notepad, jotting this down, along with his last name, which I'll leave out for the sake of privacy. And what's your brother's name? Dave, he said, sniffling. I saw he had been crying recently. Where was the last place you saw your brother? Let's retrace your steps. He started protesting, saying that wasn't going to help, but I convinced him we had to at least try. Greg led me back a little ways to where he'd seen his brother last. I walked back here already, and I looked all around here before calling you guys. I thought maybe he went off the trail to take a leak and tripped, hit his head. Something like that, I don't know. I was grasping at straws, but I think something. He hesitated. Something what? I probed. Do you think something took him, like those stories you hear about? He sounded embarrassed, but but I tried to get more out of him, and asked him which stories he was talking about. You know, you hear stories about Yosemite and other national parks. I'm sure you've heard about them. Even if you're not in on the conspiracy. Stories where people go missing like this, and it makes no sense. Someone turns their back for a second, and their son or their sister or whoever has just gone, disappeared like Dave. I saw it on YouTube. Uh-huh, I replied, not sure what corner of the internet this guy had been visiting. Well, that doesn't happen around here, I can assure you. Let's keep looking, I'm sure he'll turn up. But the longer we looked, the less we found. It really did seem like the man's brother had just vanished. I was about to call in for more support, maybe even a K9 unit, when the man yelled from a little ways off the trail, saying he'd found something. Following the sound of his voice, I eventually came to find him at the base of the mountain, face to face with the granite wall. At first I didn't understand what he was doing there, but as I got closer I saw there was actually a cave which was well hidden in the rock face. It blended in perfectly with the mountainside until you were almost nose to nose with the pale gray stone. Good job, I said, patting him on the shoulder. But then I looked at our surroundings, getting nervous. We were pretty far from the path, in the thick part of the forest, which was overgrown and tangled with vines and shrubbery. Do you think he would have gone into this cave on his own? Greg looked around, as if checking to see if his brother had left a message for him. But there was nothing. I don't think so. It's not like him to just leave me on the trail alone either, especially not for this long. If this was a prank or something, he'd have come back by now. I can tell something's not right. Has your brother played pranks on you like this before? I asked. The man was in his 20s, and his brother was probably of a similar age. Young men occasionally got lost or injured trying to scare each other by pulling pranks or filming videos in the woods. It was rare, but it had happened before. Once or twice, he admitted. I didn't call you guys for a while because I thought he was messing with me. I wouldn't put it past him, but not for this long. I was getting annoyed. Mosquitoes were biting my neck, and I was sweating in the heat of the afternoon, after marching through the foliage for hours. I imagined the guy hiding inside the cave trying to scare his younger brother. Maybe he had fallen asleep in his dark hiding place, or he was just pushing it too far, but either way, I was upset. If this was a prank, it had wasted most of my afternoon. It probably annoyed me even more because I had my own older brother who had played tricks on me more than once in our younger days, and this was bringing back memories. All right, you can come out of there right now, I yelled, marching into the cave, thinking the young man would be hiding in the small alcove. I turned a corner and saw a dark tunnel, leading deep into the darkest recesses of the granite. This made no sense. As far as I knew, there was no tunnel in this location, especially not one of this size, but it had been well hidden, nearly invisible in the rock face. I wondered if anyone knew about it, and I wondered if it was safe. I didn't feel comfortable going any further. The dark space looked like it went on for a long, long way into the distance, and I was getting an eerie feeling standing there. It felt like I could almost hear voices whispering from all around me. The words were lost in the echoing cave, and I got a strong sensation that we weren't alone, like icy fingers walking slowly up my spine. The other man came in behind me, marveling at the cave for a second before continuing to press forward. Come on, Greg said, forging ahead. He might be in trouble. He was anxious to keep going, not scared enough of this horrifying place with whispering voices coming from the shadows, and his apparent lack of fear made me twice as scared. I'm going back for help, I said, shuffling backwards. It isn't safe. Nobody knows we're here. My training and my instincts were overwhelming my curiosity, but Greg seemed not to care about the dangers. The man continued going forward, disappearing into the darkness. A few seconds later he was gone, and there was no indication he had ever existed in the first place. Greg, I called out into the black abyss. There was no response. He might as well have been a ghost. An overwhelming urge to follow him rushed over me, and I took a few steps forward, feeling hypnotized by that black tunnel leading on and on forever. But then I shook my head, slapping my face as I tried to wake myself up from whatever trance I was in, which was overruling my common sense. I turned around and left the cave, my legs shaking and my hands unsteady as I called for assistance. After meeting the search party back at the trail, We went through the woods again to find the cave hiding within the 10,000-foot tall rock face of Cathedral Peak, but it was gone. I remembered having trouble finding it the first time, and thinking it was well hidden among the pale gray surface of the mountainside. You had to be nearly face to face with a wall to see it, since it was so invisible among the crags and boulders. I tried to tell my supervisor and the other members of the search party, but they didn't believe me. They said there was no tunnel there. They looked for hours and found nothing. Helicopters swept the area and more teams with more dogs, bloodhounds and German shepherds, but nothing was turned up. There was no trace of anyone else having been out there, except me. Dumbfounded for the rest of the week, and for the rest of the summer, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept going back to that conversation I'd had with the man on the trail named Greg. The man who'd lost his brother and then disappeared into a cave that didn't exist. More and more, I began to wonder what would have happened if I'd followed him. It took a full year for me to build up the courage to go back out to that exact spot again. It happened to be on the same date and around the same time of day. Only this time I wasn't on duty. It was my weekend off, so I had plenty of time to comb the area for clues. My backpack was full of provisions, and I had enough to last for a night or two in the woods, maybe longer if necessary. Somehow I knew. I just had a feeling that if I went back on that day at that time, it would be there. The cave that didn't exist. Cathedral Peak loomed above me, getting larger as I made my way through the forest, moving toward it. The gray clouds above were shrouding the sun in darkness, while the thickening canopy blocked any remaining light from overhead. A chill ran through me, causing me to shiver involuntarily as I laid eyes on the black hole in the rock face, so plain and clear to see now. Taking a step forward, I found myself standing right in front of it, and I reached up my hands to feel the outline of the entryway, as if to confirm it was real. It was. I took a deep breath, like a diver about to submerge, and went inside. The air was cold and damp, with a strange, coppery smell. My flashlight was on my belt and I grabbed it, but then decided not to turn it on. I was getting a strange feeling like I was in an unsafe place, and needed to stay silent and hidden. There was a sound coming from up ahead which I couldn't place. It was a slurping, chewing sound, like someone tearing meat from bones with their teeth. As I went deeper and deeper into the tunnel, the air became colder, and so damp that I felt droplets of water running down my face and into my eyes. A trickle of light was filtering in somewhere as well, causing the cavern to faintly glow in places. The air seemed to shimmer and dance in front of my eyes as I went deeper and deeper, feeling entranced as I stumbled along in the shadows. Faintly I realized that there was something wrong with me, as if I had been drugged, but I no longer cared. In fact, I found the sensation to be quite pleasant. And then I was abruptly awoken from my daydream as I came around a corner and saw the horror unfolding within the guts of Cathedral Peak. I can't possibly explain what I saw down there, and the shadows obscured most of it, drenching the monstrous creature in darkness. But the impression I got was of something like an octopus or a squid, crossbred with an oversized plant or a fungus, sucking and slurping, chewing and crunching something between its teeth. After a few moments of inspection, I realized it was a person's face that was being eaten, as the details could just barely be seen in the dim light of the cave. The skin was being stripped from its cheeks, the eyelids ripped off, and the lips peeled back and slurped up like noodles. Tentacles like tangled vines were everywhere, slithering and sliding across the pale gray stone floor all around me. At first I thought it was mud beneath my feet, but as I came fully to my senses, I realized it was blood mingling and mixing with the dust beneath my feet, creating a dark, toxic red slurry which sucked at my boot heels. The tentacle vine things were everywhere, I realized with numb shock. My feet were actually stepping on some of them, and I was amazed the creature hadn't noticed me yet. But it was obviously too caught up with whatever meal it was currently ingesting. Feeling very glad I hadn't turned on my flashlight, I began to back away very slowly, my boots crunching across the writhing tentacles. A sick knot in my stomach was rising up and threatening to make me puke, fear and revulsion twisting my gut. My mind was spinning and my thoughts were racing, understanding there was a very good chance I would never leave this place. I tried desperately not to step on any more of the squirming, writhing tentacles which moved and twisted on the floor of the cave, soaking and basking in the blood which had been spilled everywhere, like pigs rolling happily in the mud. There was no possible way there could be so much of it, I thought. No one person has this much blood. This is like a river. And then I saw the others. They were hanging suspended from the ceiling, from the walls, from everywhere. Amidst the purple, vine tentacles, they breathed in and out, still being kept alive, but just barely. Dozens of them were strung up and down the length of the cave, their chests rising and falling with weak breaths, but none of them opening their eyes or speaking. It was like they were sleeping. After a few long moments of searching, I found him. Greg, the hiker from the trail who was looking for his brother. He was hanging upside down from the wall just beside me, his eyes closed. Parts of him were missing, a piece of his cheek, part of his hand, but the wounds were slowly healing. The creature, whatever it was, kept its victims alive down there, I realized. It was ingesting them slowly, perhaps even using pieces of its other victims as nutrients to feed the ones who were dying of starvation, like an otherworldly pyramid scheme built of blood and human remains. Shaking that mental image away, I grabbed Greg's shoulder, hoping to wake him up quietly. His eyes shot open a second after I touched him, revealing only the whites, and he began to screech. And I don't mean screeching like he was screaming out of fear of pain or anything like that. This was an inhuman alarm cry which signified to me immediately that there was no shred of humanity left in him. He was now a part of the hive mind of the creature and its tentacle army. As his head turned on a swivel, I saw smaller tentacles were wrapped around him, going into his brain and into his neck, invading his ears and eyes, and drilled into his spinal column. I screamed involuntarily, seeing these details, and heard the creature in the tunnel as it recognized my presence. It wasn't fast, whatever it was, but it was huge. The cave shook around me, dust and pebbles falling from the stone ceiling above as I backed away from the hiker. Beneath my feet, the vines were suddenly moving quickly, sliding around so that I couldn't find my balance. As soon as my shoes found purchase on the stone floor beneath me, I began to run. The tunnel was alive all around me now, the whipping vines twisting and bending toward me, reaching out like greedy hands trying to grab me as I raced past. Looking over my shoulder, I saw the amorphous creature's central girth was finding its way through the cave, and was moving my way a lot faster than I would have thought possible. But then again, I wouldn't have thought any of this was possible before living it. The light of the entryway was just up ahead, and I could smell the fresh air and could see the sun. Then my feet suddenly slipped as if someone had pulled a rug out from under me, and I went crashing to the ground face first. My jaw closed hard and bit the end of my tongue, causing it to bleed, the taste of copper filling my mouth a second later. I tried to get to my feet, the mental image of those poor, trapped people could be seen clearly in my mind's eye. In retrospect, I think the creature, whatever it was, needed us to be unsuspecting. If we were aware of what it was doing, its hypnosis wouldn't work. Maybe it was a chemical it released which caused people to want to explore the cave, a pheromone like insects use to communicate. But it didn't work as well if you knew about it, and if you understood its purpose. It released some more of that pheromone or whatever chemical it was using to lure people in, and I actually felt my legs grow a bit heavier. My eyelids too. It was like I had suddenly just worked 3 night shifts and really needed to sleep. But then the wave of hypnosis passed, and I felt the rumbling of the ground beneath me, and that broke me from the trance again, causing me to scramble to my feet from the cave floor and run. As I neared the cave entrance and sprinted toward it, leaving my backpack far behind in an effort to lighten the load, I saw the rocks were actually closing in, tightening the gap. The entryway was shrinking somehow. It was the vines, I realized. They were what was camouflaging the entrance, their color changing to match the pale gray stone. I picked up my pace, the twisting forms beneath me making it even more difficult. I didn't dare risk a glance over my shoulder, feeling the rumbling of the floor and knowing that the bulk of the creature was just behind me, closing in. With the gap of the exit narrowing even further, shrinking to the size of a dartboard, I dove headfirst into it, imagining my face slamming into a sheer rock wall as it suddenly turned to stone right in front of me, sealing me in this dark labyrinth of suffering forever with the rest of these tortured souls. My eyes were squinted tightly shut as I felt the vines pulling and tearing at me as I went through the gap. For an instant they squeezed in around my midsection, threatening to stop me like Winnie the Pooh after an unfortunate attempt at pilfering honey, when I popped out of the hole and it sealed up behind me in an instant. I heard a loud crash as the creature flew headlong into its own obstruction. The trap it had created for me to keep me there had hindered its escape, preventing it from chasing after me. I could hear it thrashing and clawing at the vines, desperate for more flesh to sustain itself. Whatever it was growing too large even for its own control. Left alone to feed in the heart of the mountain, it would eventually destroy itself. It would consume its own flesh to sate its monstrous hunger, like a snake eating its own tail. I had a very strong suspicion that it was true. With that very specific idea in mind, I wandered back to my car. It was easier now without the backpack and all the gear. But the walk back to the cave would be harder. There would be lots to carry next time. After a trip to the hardware store, I went back out to the trail. It was nighttime now, and the place was abandoned. I borrowed one of the Ranger at TVS and took my supplies out to the spot where the cave had been. After bringing a few buckets of water from the lake, I began my work. Since I had marked the cave, it was easy to find it again, and to begin laying down the fast-drying cement. As park rangers, our job is usually to stop people from vandalizing mountains in this way, but I got the feeling Mother Nature would forgive me. It was my job to protect this place and the people who visited, and nothing could protect people from this thing. It was best to seal it away forever and let it slowly consume itself. Without a fresh supply of hikers, it would eventually run out of calories. It would eventually expire. It was only a matter of time. The vine tentacles squirmed beneath the layer of cement, groggily reaching out for me, trying to pull me in. I grabbed the trowel and slopped on another thick coating and watched as it rapidly began to dry. And the tentacles began to smooth out and settle down again, falling back asleep. That inhuman shriek could be heard from inside again, much louder this time, as if all of the hikers who the creature had abducted had all woken up at the same instant, and for just a second, realized their predicament. "Sorry, Greg," I muttered to myself, alone in the dark forest. "I told you not to go in there." I often wonder if all of us have been abducted at one time or another, but only a few of us can remember. I had an odd experience as a child, but I cannot say I was ever abducted. When I was 10 years old, we lived in a small home in a Hamilton, Ontario neighborhood. We had the windows open in the house as air conditioners were not common in 1968. It was very hot that night. I shared a room with my brother and sister. I woke up during the night and looked out the window into the backyard, and in front of a bush about 8 feet away was a small, thin creature with shiny black skin. It looked like a small girl, but at the same time, it kinda looked like an insect. It was crouched on its legs and was leaning forward with one hand on the ground and was looking at me. It had what looked like thin antennas or needles sticking out from each side of its head and one on top. That's all I remember, and when I told my mom, she said it was a dream. We moved to Caledonia, Ontario to a large house in 1972. I now slept in my own room on the second floor. My dad and I did a project where we made a crystal radio. Some people may remember this kit from Radio Shack. I woke up one night in the summer with the windows open, and I looked down into the backyard. I saw the antenna for my radio stretched across the yard, but below it was the same female-like insectoid again on the edge of the grass, crouched down next to the patio under my window. Again, my mother said it was a dream. A few years later, we moved again, so my dad did not have to go far for work to Stony Creek, Ontario. I was now about 16 years old, and I got up in the night and looked out my window and saw it again, crouched on the edge of the sidewalk and on the grass in the front of the house. This time I went outside to look, and it was there. I walked to the sidewalk, and it did not make any noise. It just looked at me. It was all black with large black eyes. I then remember waking up and don't remember going back inside. I wrote it off as a dream. Many years later, I am not sure these were just dreams. There was an article where a UFO crashed in Mexico, and the sketches the people made looked like my dream creature without the antenna, and the pictures showed red eyes, not black. The red eyes may just have been to jazz up the story. Makes me think though, anyone else have anything like this one? In 2004, me and a friend got into his truck one evening after work. Less than a minute later, a bright, white light appeared in the sky approximately a half-mile away. My friend started the engine, but we sat still and watched the light just hanging there in the sky. Although I didn't speak of it in the moment, I had the peculiar feeling that we were being observed just as intently. After 2 minutes or so, My friend began feeling unnerved by its presence when suddenly, the white ball of luminescence shot away horizontally at an impossible speed towards the town of Campton, Kentucky. My friend wanted to go home, and I needed to retrieve my car from his driveway. He put the truck in gear, and we promptly drove away and didn't notice anything until we had passed through the town of Campton, Kentucky, traveling north on KY-15. After passing through the town, we saw the same white light had appeared above our vehicle, approximately 100 feet above us, and it was pacing along with our vehicle. My friend, whom I had known all through high school, became terrified and refused to acknowledge its presence. I found it wild and awesome. I was talking like I was addressing the light. I know who you are. Land that ship and I'll drive it like I stole it. I, for some reason, expected them to be able to sense on some level my thoughts, and I wanted to make it very clear that I wasn't happy that they were there. It followed above us from Campton to Pine Ridge, then veered off to the left, disappearing behind a hill and trees. Then when we came to our left turn onto KY 715 towards Beataville, it was hovering above the road waiting for us to catch up. I had the distinct thought or impression at where we were going. Again, I replied verbally, but also projected my thoughts to it. In total, it followed above and slightly in front of our pickup for 7 or 8 miles. At Rogers, Kentucky, my friend began to make his turn down the road he lived on, and that's when the large, bright, white object shot off in the direction of Beataville, Kentucky at again an impossible speed. I believe that I had an encounter with extraterrestrials when I was very young, and the impression that I received from them at that time was not good. I have felt since then that these are malevolent entities who want to exploit us whenever possible. That's just the way I feel. I grew up and have lived most of my life in Islip, New York. The date was September 22, 2023 at around 2:30 a.m. I was lying down with my boyfriend, went to sleep at 2 a.m. and woke up and could see the time was 2:30 a.m., but I was paralyzed and couldn't move. I tried to scream his name for help because I saw 4 gray aliens standing near me, but could not make a sound. This was not my first encounter with these beings. They were a little different than the average grays that I have experienced in the past. Their eyes were emanating dim light, as if they were some kind of contact lenses to see at night. They were looking at each other, communicating without words. One looked at me, then they all turned, and quickly the one closest to me stabbed my womanhood, for lack of better words, and it felt like the needle wand-looking thing went deep into me. The pain was like an excruciating burn, and I screamed in my head until I went unconscious. I woke up at 4 a.m. So did my boyfriend. He told me he was paralyzed and tried to talk to me, but found he could not. 2 months followed with random 30-minute episodes of lingering pain from there to my spine. I believe that they've been touching me since childhood. I used to wake up with strange marks on my back. The last time previous to this incident was almost a decade ago. I'm scared that they have found me again. I was in southern New Mexico at the time. The date was August 14, 2008 at exactly 12:03 a.m. I saw a white creature that looked like a bald baboon. It had large almond-shaped eyes, and it was squatting at the edge of Interstate 10. I slowed the vehicle to see just what I was looking at. The creature stood up on 2 legs and turned and looked. I saw it had spikes running down its back. They almost looked like the hair of baboons, but thicker and more elongated. I could see its hands, and they were primate-like. The face had the look of a baboon as well. I didn't have time to stop because I had to make a delivery at home. When we made it to San Diego, California, I met up with the other drivers at the port, and we flew home. 4 days later, we had a return trip on another delivery. This time in this same area, I witnessed the men in black. A lot of them with their black vans covered with antennas and some devices. I would not know how to describe it. The vans were unmarked and looking for something in that area. I counted 24 vans and one on the edge of the road. I saw some black OP choppers flying around in circles in the area. They were definitely looking for something on the ground. Might be the creature I saw. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the vast expanse of fields, Robert and his friend John stood on the outskirts of the farm, a few miles outside of Sandy, Oregon. The air was crisp, carrying the familiar scent of earth and the promise of a cool evening. The farm, a picturesque scene under the fading light, held a tale that lingered in the whispers of the wind. Robert and John reminisced about the strange events that had unfolded on the farm decades ago, back in the early 80s. It all began with peculiar sounds emanating from the dense woods that bordered the property. John's parents, curious and slightly uneasy, would huddle together at night, trying to decipher the mysterious noises that echoed through the darkness. One evening, curiosity got the better of John. The young boy, filled with a sense of adventure, crept to the edge of the woods to investigate the strange sounds that had become a nightly occurrence. As he ventured deeper into the shadows, he was met with an unexpected sight: a creature, a Bigfoot, standing about 200 feet away from the house. The creature, towering at 5'6", locked eyes with John. In that moment, an uncanny connection passed between the boy and the enigmatic being. John was sure he saw a grin spread across the creature's face before it turned and ambled away into the woods. The encounter left John both bewildered and fascinated, etching a memory that would linger for a lifetime. Decades later, Robert, now an old friend, visited John at the farm. The two men, bound by years of friendship and the shared memory of that peculiar night, decided to revisit the site where the enigmatic creature had made its brief but impactful appearance. The woods, once a source of mystery and trepidation, now stood silent under the watchful gaze of the setting sun. As they walked through the familiar terrain, John recounted the details of that night, each word carrying the weight of a memory that had never faded. The rustling leaves and the gentle sway of the branches seemed to echo the whispers of the past. They reached the spot where John had stood, a vantage point that connected him to the mysterious being. The two friends, now older and wiser, exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the rarity of such encounters. The farm, once a backdrop to an unexplained phenomenon, held its secrets close, guarded by the trees that had witnessed it all. And as Robert and John stood there, looking over the site, the echoes of the past seemed to meld with the present, creating a timeless connection between man and the mysteries that lurk within the woods of Sandy, Oregon. I'm not a long-haul trucker, but me and my friends were at our usual swimming hole with a dock, and all like a public access, and there was an old dude getting shells for his wife when he pulled out a human jawbone. Turns out it was a dude that went missing like 10 years ago. I guess he got stuck under a rotted log under near the dick, and no one know. Literally 100s of people, including my whole family, were swimming and fishing less than 25 feet away from his body. Just crazy to think someone could be dead that close to you and no one would know. I just listened to your podcast about Ouija boards. I've got an interesting story. My ex-wife used to dabble with Ouija boards. We were horsing around with it one night and the following weekend. I'd gone out fishing with a friend of mine and came home later that evening. My ex-wife and I watched TV for a while, and then we went to bed. It was about 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night. The back door of the house and the front door of the house were in line with each other, and our bedroom was at the other end of the house. I was just dozing off when I swore I heard the back door open and somebody entered, then closed the door and walked through my kitchen. I went to my dresser drawer and I grabbed my 9mm handgun. I took it out and I'm standing in my hallway thinking, God help. I don't want to have to do this. I got locked and loaded and I swung out into the hall, and there was just enough residual light in the living room that I could see the silhouette of this individual, about 6'3", a bit of a stocky person. I uttered some expletives and told him to freeze right where he was, or I was going to shoot him. Do you remember the old window shades where you pull them down and let them go up? They go shoop and they go up and they spin around. Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened to this fellow. He went straight up, just like the old window shades. He just went straight up and vanished. And that was a very puckering experience, if you know what I mean. I'll never forget it. We had other interesting happenings in that house too. We had clocks that mysteriously would just slide off the shelf and drop on the floor for no reason at all. Not a trucker, but I drive 40-50k miles per year. Brothers and I driving home at night from a concert. It was after 1 a.m. and we were between the ages of 14-19. We come to the last intersection of our trip about a mile from our house, and we stop at the red light, waiting to make a left-hand turn. Pitch black, no street lights, just the red glow of the stoplight, and all of a sudden a guy covered in blood stumbles and slams himself against the passenger window. We scream and blow through the light, freaking out, wondering what the hell that was. Zombie. Crazy psychopath. Turns out there had been a bad wreck a little further up the road, and the guy was stumbling down the street, badly injured, trying to find help. We were scared to death at the time, but felt terrible the next day after hearing about him on the news. I live in an apartment surrounded by a residential area in the US. When I leave out of the back entrance, I can look across a city-owned parking lot to see the backyard of a few homes. One in particular has a swing set that someone around preteen age uses constantly. I'm talking when I take my dog out at 8 a.m., around lunchtime some days, dinner time, even around 3 a.m., every day. They're of school age, so I think that's why I don't normally catch them swinging during the midday. There's no schedule, but I can usually put money on the fact that they're swinging. I'm typing this at 6:02 p.m., and they're swinging. The first few times I heard it at night, the creepy sound of a squeaky swing set, and thought it was just some teenager being angsty. Now it's like clockwork just about whenever I go outside, unless it's raining. It could be 100 degrees F, 10 degrees, they're still swinging. Occasionally I'll be around when the swinging stops, but I could come back a few hours later, and they're swinging again. Their back is to me, and the backyard is partially covered by trees, so I'm not really able to see much of them, but I can definitely see that they're swinging. I didn't want to tell anyone in my apartment in case they think I'm a nutcase, so I thought I'd look like a nutcase in front of internet strangers. Edit. Jesus Christ, I think some of y'all think I'm calling for the kid's head. I don't care what they do, and I wouldn't go to their house or do anything to the child. I just thought I was going crazy at first hearing the squeak of a swing set at 3 in the morning, only to start seeing some child out there swinging for like 12 hours a day. We live in Lac du Bonnet, Manitoba, Canada. On the night of November 30th, 2016, my husband went to bed slightly before me. He was on the far side of the bed facing towards my side and the door. I came to bed slightly after him. I lay down and closed my eyes. I reopened my eyes as I had an uneasy feeling and saw a gray alien entity standing beside my husband. I immediately closed my eyes tight as I was so scared. I reopened my eyes to ensure that I had seen what I had seen. It was still standing beside my husband looking at us. I was not dreaming as I had just laid down. I kept my eyes closed and went to sleep shortly after. Both of us slept through the night, which is totally unusual for both of us, and we woke up feeling very refreshed. Shortly after this encounter, my husband's hair began falling out in patches all over his head, and his hair went very gray with a broad gray streak down the top center of his head. I also lost a significant amount of hair from my head, but mostly the top center of my head. I did not get patches like my husband. The bald patches on my husband's head did not grow in for several months, and then started to grow in. After the encounter, my husband was almost totally gray-haired. Slowly his patches began growing back in, but the new hair was totally dark brown with little or no gray. His remaining hair started growing dark brown. At this time his hair is almost pure dark brown as it was before the encounter, but his beard remains white. We discussed the encounter with each other, and feel that we were likely affected by radiation from the entity, and we may have been abducted and returned. In January of 1978, I was stationed at McGuire AFB, New Jersey. One evening, during the time frame of 3 hours and 5 hours, there were a number of UFO sightings in the area over the airfield and Fort Dix Army Camp. I am a security policeman and was on routine patrol at the time. New Jersey, State Police and Fort Dix MPs were running code in the direction of Brownsville, New Jersey. A state trooper then entered Gate 5 at the rear of the base requesting assistance and permission to enter. I was dispatched and the trooper wanted access to the runway area, which led to the very back of the airfield and connected with a heavily wooded area which is part of the Dix training area. He informed me that a Fort Dix MP was pursuing a low-flying object, which then hovered over his car. He described it as oval-shaped, with no details, and glowing with a bluish green color. His radio transmission was cut off. At that time, in front of his police car appeared a thing about 4 feet tall, grayish sick, brown, fat head, long arms, and slender body. The MP panicked and fired 5 rounds from his 45 cal into the thing, and 1 round into the object above. The object then fled straight up and joined with 11 others high in the sky. This we all saw, but didn't know the details at the time. Anyway, the thing ran into the woods towards our fence line, and they wanted to look for it. By this time, several patrols were involved. We found the body of the thing near the runway. It had apparently climbed the fence and died while running. It was all of a sudden hush hush, and no one was allowed near the area. We roped off the area and a FOSI came out and took over. That was the last I saw of it. There was a bad stench coming from it too. Like ammonia smelling, but it wasn't consent sick in the air. That day, a team from Wright-Patterson AFB came in a C-141 and went to the area. They crated it in a wooden box, sprayed something over it, and then put it into a bigger metal container. They loaded it in the plane and took off. That was it. Nothing more was said, no report made, and we were all told not to have anything to say about it, or we would be court-martialed. Morse, in subsequent conversations, revealed that 2 days after the incident, he and others on duty at the scene were summoned to Wright-Patterson AFB for interrogation, and each was transferred promptly to a separate base overseas. When I was in 8th grade, I was a pretty popular kid, well-liked, and I liked it that way. Before class started, a fellow student brought in a book on witchcraft. He said that there was a page with an incantation, and if you say it 3 times, the devil will appear. Nobody would read it because they were scared, and to be honest, so was I. But I wanted to stay popular, so I said I would read it. The gist of it was, as far as I can recall, a prayer to Satan, saying that he was the one true God, and that I give my soul to him, etc. On the 3rd time through reading it, I physically felt something pass through my body. It was like my breath was taken away for a split second. I got those cold chills, you know the ones I'm talking about, and I felt faint. I stopped mid-sentence and the kids freaked out. They said they saw something happen to me. My hair blew like a fan was on, but there wasn't. They said that I was still for like 2 minutes, not talking or responding to them. When it was over, I opened my eyes to see the kids in my class with wide eyes, and their jaws open asking me if I was okay. I closed the book and told them what I felt, and they said they believed me because of how I was acting. I have never been one for believing in the supernatural, but when I feel myself starting to doubt, I remember back to that day when I was a stupid 8th grader who may have inadvertently sold my soul to Satan for a little popularity. I am Catholic, and every time I go to confession, I ask for forgiveness from that, and I try to be a good man, hoping that when my time comes, I don't find myself on the wrong side of the fence. I have thought that maybe it wasn't Satan that passed through me, but rather an angel protecting me and also scaring me straight by passing through me, in a way saying, don't do that. Either way, the story is true, and I will always carry that question with me: did I submit myself to Satan when I was in 8th grade? I am a 25-year-old female, and I would really appreciate a logical explanation for this. For the past 4 mornings, I've woken up only to find blood specks in my bathroom sink. I noticed this before I go to brush my teeth first thing. The previous 3 nights, I've chalked it up to something I spilled, or maybe a cut I have. However, today, I hadn't used the sink whatsoever and found 3 spots of partially dried blood. The blood is not mixed with anything toothpaste or other fluids. I've checked the ceiling, my tap, and my cabinet for any drips. This included checking each product I own, and I have none that are this color. And sorry to add, I am not experiencing that time of the month. I live in a shared house with 6 girls. However, I have my own room and bathroom, which are locked at all times. I've spoken to them, and they are just as confused as I am. I am heavily medicated to sleep each night as I suffer from insomnia, but I have never been known to sleepwalk. I can't understand how I could get drops of blood into the sink with no visible marks on me, or no blood on the sheets or my hands. Lastly, my biggest fear is insects. I am open to the fact that it could be insects, but I don't own any pets to partially rule out fleas, keep my area clean and dry, and have no other symptoms of insects in my room, let alone blood-sucking ones. Sorry for the long post. Please let me know what you think. I'm a little scared to sleep tonight if it's insects, lol. When I was very young, I was visiting a family friend at their camper in the woods, no idea where. I remember at one point being outside and hearing what sounded to me like a church choir, but we were in the middle of nowhere and it was dark out. No one else seemed to hear it. I still think about it and wonder where I was, and what on earth it could have been. This happened when I was much younger, so details may be a little shoddy, but honestly I remember it like it was yesterday. I live in Australia, and we don't have much woodlands here besides a few that span on for a couple hundred acres or so, nothing like what Americans have. And when I was younger I'd get lost in these woods a lot, and sometimes even sleep in them for a couple days at most, surviving off fish and creek water. I never had any creepy encounters besides this one time. I was about 10 years old, and just like I do at least once every 2-3 years, I had gotten lost in the woods again. I was completely fine during the day as I had eaten an hour prior to realizing I had no idea where I was, so I had the old, ah damn, here we go again moment, and decided to walk around to find some sticks to make a little fire. I knew a lot about outdoor survival as my family went camping a lot, and I watched videos on YouTube all the time since it interested me, and I loved the woods. I had set a fire up as it started getting dark, and was about to put out my fire before I saw a small deer on the tree line just nearly out of range of my fire's light. It was staring at me, which gave me some chills, but I just went, "Ah, a little deer," and I waved to it. The deer scurried off into a bush behind it, and I couldn't see it anymore. Then I heard this really weird noise like twigs snapping, and all of a sudden, a much larger deer came out of the same bush I just saw the small one jump into. At this point I knew something was off, so I stood up and stared at the deer as it stared back at me, and I was mentally preparing myself for the idea that this thing could run at me. I was a little kid, WTF am I supposed to think? The deer started walking a bit towards me, and I backed up a little and crouched down, but as the deer kept getting closer, and I kept backing up, I looked down and realized this F had a hoof directly in the fire, and wasn't reacting to it at all. This creeped me the F out. I mean, his fur was burning, and it was starting to burn its skin, but it just wasn't reacting. I immediately set off bolting, but I heard it coming behind me, not really running but fast enough to keep up with my little legs. I came over this small hill and jumped down into a bush to try and hide from it. And that's when it happened. The scariest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and I remember it so vividly. The deer's silhouette against the moonlight appeared, and as I stared at the deer, it let out this blood-curdling call that I've never heard from another animal before, and all of a sudden, the silhouette started caving in on itself. I could hear its bones snapping and flesh ripping, and this thing just kept getting smaller. Then suddenly it got much bigger, and I closed my eyes because I just couldn't watch anymore. When I opened them, there was a man standing where the deer stood, or at least, the silhouette of a man. He was looking around, and then started calling out in this creepy, almost distorted voice, "Hello. Hello." And he repeated this for about 10 minutes while I just sat there in silence, refusing to answer whatever the F stood just a couple meters above me. The man then just walked off into the trees, and I heard that same awful snapping noise before it eventually faded away. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in that bush the rest of the night, terrified that this thing could still be lurking around the area, waiting for me to appear again. Once the morning came, I walked in a straight line until I reached a road I recognized, and then I ran home. I didn't tell my family about it as I feared I wouldn't be taken seriously, but I was terrified. I haven't been into the woods since that day, and always stayed home when my family went camping after begging them not to go. I'm 21 now. That incident was 10-11 years ago, and I still remember that silhouette and the noise of the bones snapping. I've done tons of research, and my only conclusion to what happened is that I narrowly escaped a skinwalker. I'm tearing up from fear as I write all of this, remembering that horrific night. I hope you all enjoyed my retelling, and if anyone has any other explanation on what this could have been, please tell me. My dad passed back in 2001, and my mom has been without him all these years. They were married over 50 years when he passed. My mom tends to keep everything, and when it was time for her to leave that big house she had shared with my dad, she struggled letting go even more. She was moving into a senior apartment, and as she packed things up, she kept coming across dimes. She'd find them under things as she was packing. Every time she'd find one, she would put it on the windowsill in the kitchen. She had about 6 dimes when she moved. I told her I thought it was Dad, encouraging her to keep packing, that he wanted her out of that house. For her new apartment, I bought her a little ceramic box with a guy playing the saxophone. My dad placed the sax for her to put her dimes in. On moving day, we were walking back and forth down the short hall from the outside door to her apartment door, just about 30 feet. After about an hour, I was walking down her hall that I had walked with boxes many times, and there on the carpet was a dime. My mom turned 97 on Saturday. She's slowing down, but she gets on Facebook, emails, and streams stuff on her iPad. And she still finds dimes. Just found one today. I'm a 32-year-old father of 5. I live in Southwest Washington State, not far from Mount St. Helens. My number one passion is hunting big old smart blacktails. I also bow hunt elk, as well as rifle hunt predators. Unfortunately, we can no longer run dogs. However, I have experience with dogs. For a few short years, I was a big game hunting guide in northern Idaho. After close to 25 years in the woods, I saw something that has left me stressing every time I have to hike in the dark, going in or coming out of the mountains. It was rifle deer season, and I was hunting a massive buck that I'd seen the previous years. The buck lives in the middle of nowhere. The logging road is a 30-minute trip. I was slowly pushing my mountain bike with my left hand and holding my 270 with my right, and as I turned my head from looking off to my right, I looked straight down the trail at the point where the game trail intersects. I saw a 7 to 8 foot tall, massive statured being, black in color, walking in a steady stride across the trail, looking at me the entire time. The one detail that stands out the most, more than its size, color, or even the threat level, was how long its arms were. They are well below the knees, with a significant constant swaying motion with each step. I froze in awe and shock at what I had just seen. However, I wasn't scared to leave. To be honest, it was like my brain couldn't really comprehend what I had just seen. So I started telling myself anything to explain it away. Oh, it's just a bear. Maybe it was a real wet deer elk. It could have been a hunter in dark clothing without orange on. I finally felt assured it was something else other than what I had just seen and continued on. I walked up to the point where this being crossed the trail, thinking I would see a deer or a bear track to explain it away. However, there were no tracks. The ground was a hard orange-brown clay. However, it was raining, and surely if anything on the hoof or anything with claws walked there, it would have left a track. I looked and found nothing as far as tracks. The sighting lasted just seconds. However, it was long enough for me to tell that there was no way it was a bear, elk, human, cat, or deer. I've seen some things in nature that most people simply would not believe, but I've never seen anything like what I saw that day. The more replay it in my mind, I am convinced I saw Bigfoot. I feel very awkward even typing this. I've only told 3 people what I saw that day. 2 are my friends and hunting partners, and 1 is an uncle who I have looked up to and inspired me to hunt since I was a kid. All 3 of them literally laughed and gawked at me and told me how there was no proof, no game trail videos, no bones, and no bodies. So I've never brought it up with anyone since, not even my wife or children. It is very reassuring when someone speaks truth to power on this subject.
We sometimes stay at a cabin in an isolated area on Vancouver Island. For those of you who aren't familiar with the geography, it is rocky coastal climate with similar vegetation to Oregon. My sister, my cousin, and myself, all in our early 20s at the time, had driven into town, about 45 minutes away, for a late-night movie. I like to hike out in the forest in Northern California a lot, hunting mushrooms. One day I'm out in the woods, not a soul around, and I hear the extremely eerie wail of an earthquake siren. They must have been testing it, but being out in the middle of the woods and hearing that was like being in Silent Hill. It continued for several minutes, not a normal siren either, a really long, drawn-out, up and down wail of a siren, the kind that would give you chills on a sunny day. I live out in the cornfields. I used to hike my neighbor's cornfield all the time with permission from my neighbor who owned the cornfield. He knew my family because my dad dated his daughter way back when, and he liked him. Of course, my dad and his daughter broke up, but he still liked my dad, even more so when my mom and dad became his neighbors. He had a brook running through the cornfield for natural irrigation. This brook was part of a river that spanned pretty much the whole county, and it entered on his property in a forest that was on the edge of his property and my other neighbor's property. It was 100% his property, and not mine or the other neighbors. So one day, when I was young, I followed this brook to the forest, simply because it was summer and I had no school and nothing better to do. I had always been drawn to the tranquility of nature, which is why I became a park ranger. When I was assigned to Hollow Grove Park, I was thrilled. The park was shrouded in a serene beauty that made me feel at ease. Yet, there was something odd about this place that I couldn't quite put my finger on. The first thing I noticed was the mushrooms. They were everywhere, in shapes and sizes I had never seen before. They had an uncanny appearance. Their oddly shaped caps and twisted stems weaving an intricate tapestry across the park. The fauna and flora seemed to behave strangely around these mushrooms. The birds would avoid flying over them, and the usually adventurous squirrels would scamper away at their sight. The flowers around the mushrooms seemed to bloom less brightly, and the grass seemed to grow less green. Soon, visitors started reporting sightings of a strange creature. They described it as a bizarre cryptid that seemed to sprout from the fungi itself. It was said to move with an eerie grace, its form undulating and shifting as it moved amidst the mushroom. The reports unnerved me. As a park ranger, it was my duty to ensure the safety of the park and its visitors. I decided to investigate, to uncover the origins of this cryptid and its connection to the mushroom. As night fell, I ventured into the park, armed with a flashlight and a resolve to find answers. I moved slowly, my eyes scanning the illuminated patches of earth for any sign of the creature. After what felt like hours, I saw it. In a clearing filled with mushrooms, it emerged. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a part of the mushrooms, yet separate. It moved with an uncanny grace, its form constantly shifting and changing. It seemed to be a part of the park itself, a manifestation of the mushrooms that dominated the landscape. I realized then that this cryptid was not a threat, but a guardian. The mushrooms were a part of its life cycle, its form and existence tied to their growth. It was an essential part of the ecosystem, maintaining a balance. But something was disrupting this balance. The excessive growth of the mushrooms was a sign of a deeper problem, a symptom of an imbalance in the park's ecosystem. I spent the following weeks working tirelessly, conducting soil tests and studying the park's flora and fauna. My efforts paid off when I discovered an invasive species of plant that was leaching nutrients from the soil, causing the mushrooms and, in turn, the cryptid to multiply in an attempt to restore balance. With the help of the park's management, we implemented a plan to remove the invasive plants and restore the park's natural harmony. It was a long process, but we eventually managed to contain the situation. The mushrooms returned to their natural numbers, and sightings of the cryptid became rare. The park returned to its peaceful state, its serenity no longer marred by the unsettling growth of mushrooms. I often think back to that strange cryptid, a creature born of nature's resilience. It serves as a reminder of the delicate balance of our ecosystems and the strange and wonderful ways in which nature asserts itself. As Sergeant James Odysseus Colton, leader of a Navy SEAL team, my life was defined by high-stakes missions and unimaginable pressure, but nothing could have prepared me for the horror that awaited us on a seemingly routine recovery operation in South America. Our mission was simple: recover a stolen artifact from a dangerous cartel. We infiltrated their compound, neutralized the threat, and retrieved the artifact, an ancient green-tinted mirror with an intricate serpentine frame. Victorious, we began our return journey. It was then we realized the price of our mission. The mirror, when caught in the moonlight, awakened an ancient terror. The Gorgon, the monstrous creature, with her hair of writhing serpents and eyes that turned men to stone, emerged from the mirror's depths. Our fellow soldiers, caught by her gaze, were petrified, instantly. Their screams echoed in my ears as they became stone statues. It was a sight that would haunt me forever. With our numbers dwindling, I rallied the remaining men. "We face an enemy like no other," I said, my voice steady despite the terror gnawing at my insides. "But we're seals. We adapt. We overcome." We fought the Gorgon with everything we had. Bullets ricocheted off her scaled body. Grenades did nothing. It was the mirror, I realized. The artifact, it was our only chance. With a daring plan in mind, I ordered my men to distract the Gorgon while I maneuvered myself behind her. The mirror clutched tightly in my hands. The Gorgon, focused on my team, didn't notice my approach. With a deep breath, I thrust the mirror in front of her. Caught in her own gaze, the Gorgon stiffened. Her serpentine hair hissed and writhed before turning rigid. In moments, she was transformed into a monstrous stone statue. Our relief was short-lived as we took in the stone forms of our comrades. The victory was bitter, our losses too great. We had defeated the Gorgon, but at what cost? The artifact, we later discovered, had been part of a dangerous gambit by the cartel to unleash chaos and seize power amidst the confusion. Their plan backfired, but it was us who paid the price. As we left the battlefield, the stone forms of our brothers in arms, a stark reminder of the cost of our duty, I made a vow. We would honor our fallen, and we would continue to fight, no matter what horrors we faced. We were the SEALs, and we would never back down. Went to Table Rock View, Appalachian Trail, Dauphin, Pennsylvania. Yesterday with some friends. We wandered a bit off the trail to look at an interestingly shaped rock, and me and another friend heard what sounded like a fox, but the noises were more like how an owl hooted, but a bit more high-pitched. So imagine if a fox screamed, but more relaxed, like an owl hoo. And it only happened 3 times, then stopped. One of my other friends just randomly started talking about how people who hike around the Appalachian Trail report hearing noises like children crying or a woman screaming. But it's a skinwalker trying to lure you further off the trail. I said, "Wait, didn't you just hear that?" Kind of sounded like a high-pitched fox noise. That was when my one friend say, yeah, he heard it too. But my other friends didn't notice it. I was literally expecting to see someone, possibly younger kids, walk up the trail, but no one else ever came during that time. What do y'all think? I'd always loved my job as a park ranger. I enjoyed the peace and quiet of the wilderness, the sound of the birds, and the fresh air. However, my most recent adventure in the woods had been anything but peaceful. It all started when I received a call about a group of campers who'd gone missing in the woods. I immediately set out to search for them, knowing that the dense forest could be dangerous for those who didn't know the terrain. As I made my way through the woods, I noticed something unusual in the distance. It looked like a small town, but one that I had never seen before. I decided to investigate, hoping to find some clues as to where the missing campers might have gone. As I approached the town, I noticed that something was off. There were no signs of life, no movement, no sound. The town looked completely deserted. As I began to explore the town, I realized that it had been abandoned for years. The buildings were old and crumbling, the paint was faded, and the streets were overgrown with weeds. I wandered through the town, feeling a sense of unease. There was something about the place that made me feel like I was being watched. It was then that I heard a noise, a rustling in the bushes. I drew my weapon, ready for anything, but as I turned to face the source of the noise, I saw a group of campers emerging from the woods. "Thank God we found you," one of them exclaimed. "We'd been lost in these woods for days." I breathed a sigh of relief, glad to have found the missing campers. But as I looked closer at their faces, I realized that something was wrong. They looked pale and frightened, as if they had seen something terrible. "What happened to you?" I asked. The campers hesitated before one of them spoke up. "We stumbled upon this town, and we thought it was abandoned. But then we started to hear strange noises, and we saw things moving in the shadows. Something's hunting us, and it's getting closer with each passing moment. I knew that we had to leave the town immediately. We packed up our gear and set out, hoping to make it back to the safety of the park. As we made our way through the woods, I could feel the presence of something following us. It was like a predator stalking its prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. We tried to move quickly, but the woods were thick and the terrain was treacherous. We stumbled and fell, struggling to keep up our pace. And then we heard it, a growling sound that chilled us to the bone. We turned to face the noise and saw a creature emerging from the shadows. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was tall and muscular, with sharp claws and teeth, and a fur-covered body that glinted in the moonlight. The campers screamed and ran in terror, but I stood my ground. I raised my weapon, aiming for the creature's heart. But as I fired, I realized that it was too late. The creature had already pounced on me, its claws tearing through my flesh. I fell to the ground, feeling my life slipping away. The last thing I heard was the screams of the campers as they fled into the night. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The doctors told me that I'd been found by a search party, wandering through the woods in a state of delirium. I was with my friend I'm going to call Bane, going through the woods. Now let me trace back a little. This was in this big forest that stretches for miles with an entrance around the block from where I used to live. I saw and heard all kinds of scary phenomena in that woods. One time I was walking through with Band, and when you first get into the woods there's a path to the right that's blocked off by a fallen tree. If you go to the left there's a little hill that goes down now. There's two paths to go. The one on the left leads to a forest with denser trees, and the one on the right has the same trees all the way through. If you go to the right, there's two more really long paths, probably about a 3 or 4 minute walk, but you can still see to the end, one on the left and on the right. The time before I heard a baby crying coming from the left. I didn't even get to go deep into the woods this time to be scared out. I thought I was tripping at first. I thought it was the tree, and my eyes were playing tricks on me. But I squinted my eyes and saw whatever this was really moving, and the reason I thought it was a tree was because I could see through him. It was a man wearing a brown hooded cloak or robe. He was transparent, walking left to right faster than humanly possible. But it would only walk 2 or 3 feet before turning around and just doing it repeatedly. I ran out fast as heck, LOL. Anyways, about the Wahila, it's a big giant white wolf, kinda like the Wendigo. It can shapeshift, but the white wolf is the main form. One time I went down the left path and out of nowhere from the right, I see a giant white wolf. It jumped out from a bush and made not a single noise, but this creature is said to kill. It hopped back into the bush and just disappeared. It didn't even scare me. Whatever this was gave me vibes of good, like it was looking out for me or protecting me, because it didn't attack me. Except my friend didn't see the same thing I saw. After we had run out, he told me he saw a giant white creature standing there on 2 legs. I told him what I saw, and he dismissed it, telling me what he saw. So we saw 2 different things. Was it a Wahila, or do y'all think it could have been something else? What do y'all think the brown-robed man was? I need names for these cryptids or phenomena because I need some kind of explanation. The dense forest seemed to hold its breath as I patrolled the winding trails of the national forest. Strange occurrences had been plaguing these woods, incidents that defied logical explanation. A chill ran down my spine as I couldn't shake the feeling that this forest was haunted by an unseen presence. With each step, I delved deeper into the mysteries that clung to the ancient trees. Whispers of tragedy and untold secrets echoed through the rustling leaves, urging me to uncover the truth. The weight of the past pressed upon me, as if the forest itself yearned to share its sorrow. It was then that I stumbled upon the grim history that hid beneath the serene facade. 5 past park rangers, their lives extinguished in a shroud of mystery. Their deaths remained unresolved, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a lingering fear that I could be next. As I continued my patrol, a foreboding presence settled over me, intensifying with each passing moment. It was as if unseen eyes watched my every move, their gaze piercing through the veil of reality. My heart raced, my instincts urging me to flee, but duty compelled me to press on. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my attention. I turned to face the source, my eyes widening in terror. There, before me, stood a four-legged creature, its body contorted in unnatural angles. Its eyes glowed a haunting red, emanating an otherworldly aura. The locals called it the crawler, a creature whispered about in hushed tones, said to be a harbinger of doom. Fear and adrenaline coursed through my veins as I raised my weapon, aiming to protect myself from this abomination. I squeezed the trigger, but the crawler evaded the shot, disappearing into the depths of the forest with an unearthly agility. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. I returned to my isolated cabin, seeking solace in the sanctuary of my dreams. Fatigue weighed heavily on me as I succumbed to sleep. The morning light cast its gentle rays upon the campsite, but something was amiss. Campers nearby discovered a lifeless body lying motionless in the remote cabin. The cause of death, a stroke. A cruel irony that a ranger dedicated to protecting others had succumbed to the very depths of his own fear. When I was around 17-18, I'm now 23. Probably about a year or so before I had symptoms show up. I worked at a cinema which is notoriously haunted. People quit their jobs from seeing things. Multiple people I know claim to have heard unexplainable voices, laughs, cries, doors locking, being knocked on when no one's around, that sort of thing. I was working on the food counter and a guy in a wheelchair came in and said, "Look after your body, kid," in an extremely haunting fashion. Me, being an immature drug enthusiast, laughed it off, and he'll never forget the look he gave me when I giggled at what he said. It's almost like I can still see his face and hear how he said it. I've had sleep paralysis with the guy's face staring back at me. Creepy, sir. But the funny thing is, shortly after this is when I started experiencing crazy health symptoms. Loss of control over my bowels, bladder, pain in legs, arms, etc. I clearly didn't listen to his advice. Smoking, drinking, doing pills, sniffing. Anything doing pills. Sniffing anything that can be sniffed, basically just abusing my body to a high extent. I can't help but think this guy was some kind of messenger. Something warning me about the path I was about to go down. So fast forward to today, I'm not well at all, and it all feels like I've just ignored the signs that were put before me. I've never really been into the whole God stuff, but I've always left a space for the thought of something bigger than me. But recently I've started praying before I go to sleep, just asking for insurance with my health, etc., hoping for the best kind of thing. I've always had an overactive imagination. I used to think I could astral project and always had crazy lucid dreams. But in the past few days, I feel like when I close my eyes, all I can see is crazy dark shit, almost like demons and dark shit going on. But last night, I had these visions where two people were dressed in like robes, and one of them offered me a hand, which I took. One of them then continued to dig into my chest and seemingly remove the pain in my chest, and then held their hand up, almost bringing attention to their 5 fingers. I don't know what this means, and it kind of scares me as to what it could. I guess what I'm here saying is, you guys just think I'm nuts. Anyone had any similars going on in their life? Is it time to fully accept God into my life? Is it time to fully accept God into my life? F knows, let me know what you think. My son and I were in the Detroit area in the fall of 2000 October. We heard what we thought was a high-pitched scream coming out of the creek bottom. We heard the sound twice, once very close, just about 300 yards downhill from us, then again from farther off and to the right in an area of big timber. The sound left an impression on the two of us. We have hunted and fished all over Oregon, but the sound is like nothing I have ever in my life heard. It was as if you could hear it in your head after the sound had stopped. The area is southwest of Detroit on the South Shore. Would very much like to hear other recorded sounds, but little unsure. Maybe a little freaky hearing the same sound recorded by other people. I've been interested in Bigfoot since was a kid, but the sound we heard is like nothing we've ever heard. I met up with my friend at his house after work at about 10 p.m. We both got off work at the same time and go to his house to hang out. We were outside on his porch near the driveway. We heard the horses across the street in the field running around, which was odd, but didn't think nothing of it. We heard a turkey squabble, which then we thought a mountain lion was out there. Shortly after that, we heard loud and repetitive sniffing noise. We all just stood there for a minute, looking at one another. I was asking my friend what he thought it was, and he did not know. My friend is an avid hunter of all game, and has never encountered anything like it. We then realized, that is weird, and also realized how close we were to these creatures. We could see that the one crouched was smaller than the one standing, so the creature might have gotten defensive and backed up, loud, like a large dog sniffing in your ear. After a few seconds of wondering, we went to the edge of the road. I made a coughing noise to get a reaction from whatever it was out there. Just as I did that, we heard a very loud and aggressive grunt. We went inside to grab a rifle and a flashlight. We for sure thought it was a bear or mountain lion, and we knew it was close. We went back to the edge of the road. The road separates his driveway from the field where the noise was coming from. He shined his flashlight in the direction of the noises, his fanning type pattern. His first pass reveals nothing, but on his second pass, we freaked. There wasn't much light except the motion detector and our flashlight. With that, we saw the figures of two creatures in crouched position, just in front of the fence in the field. They were literally 15 feet or so in front of us. Their eyes were staring right back at us, and they were close together on their faces, not like a horse. Just then one of them stood up on two legs. At this point I had moved to the side a little because I did not want my friend in my line of fire, just in case. I had a diagonal view of the creatures now. I can tell you that this thing stood about 7 to 8 feet tall, because the fence at 5 feet tall, and this creature rested its forearms on top of the fence without effort. I mean, it could have scaled the fence easily. The other creature remained crouched. I could see their circle-shaped heads. They had a shadow because the light, so their shapes were pretty clear, and we were so close the measurements of their shadows were not too far off from actual. The one that stood was incredibly big. He was boasting his chest out, maybe to intimidate us, or for defense. We were scared, but did not feel threatened. However, the creature could have easily scaled the fence and got us if it wanted. I mean, it was probably watching us long before we saw it. Our fear finally sunk in, and we went inside to look out the windows. We did not see anything else, but the dogs in his backyard started barking about a minute or two after we came inside. Dogs that live in the area always bark due to other animals that wander down the mountain, which is a clear shot from the field where this creature was. I have not been to his house at night ever since, and he has recently moved from the residence, anyhow. At the time, I was a college student, and have since did service in the military, and I am single father. I have no need to make this up. I'm not sure what I saw was a Bigfoot, but I know it wasn't a horse, mountain lion, or bear. Bears do not live in this part of the area. They live in the region, but not here. This part of the valley is too dry, and their food source is not here either. I researched the bear population and the likelihood of a bear entering this area. It is not common. What I saw stood like a large man, moved like a man, and looked like a man and looked like a man, but was not. This is the first time I have formally reported this. Driving back to the cabin at night is never fun. Very isolated, spotty cell reception, hairpin turns, black darkness due to the isolation and lack of street lamps or cabin lights, and lots of deer, so you have to keep your eyes peeled. This night was even worse because it was very foggy coming in from the right side of the road, and even with our brights from our truck, we could barely see past it. My cousin is also a bit of a reckless driver and was taking the turns a bit fast for my liking. It was stressful to say the least and completely eerie. So when one of us spoke up to say they were feeling spooked, all three agreed. So we get to an isolated stretch with literally nothing but forest to our right and a steep incline to our left, and suddenly onto the shoulder of the road and out of the fog steps a boy. He looked about no more than 12 years old, and he was just standing on the shoulder of the road from the forest watching as our car drove by. I get creeped out just typing this. He wasn't injured, was not trying to flag us down or get our attention necessarily, beyond his mere presence on the side of the road in this ridiculously isolated area at midnight in the fog, and had a very neutral expression on his face, which was surprising, given that we probably almost blinded him with our brights. We freaked out. My cousin almost swerved off the road. My sister was sitting in the back and didn't pay attention until my cousin swerved. She looked in the rear view, assuming we had just narrowly avoided a deer, and in a nervous voice said, I think I am seeing things, but did you guys just see a boy on the side of the road in the fog?" Once we confirmed that none of us were hallucinating, we debated turning back, and in retrospect we probably should have pulled over to see whether he was a runaway or in an accident, and if he needed help, but we were way too freaked out and just continued on. To this day, I cannot figure out why he would have been out there, and it sends shivers down my spine to think about it. What I found was this nice little waterfall, not too big and not too small. It was perfect, especially with the canopy of the forest covering it. It was my little hideaway from the rest of the world. When we had a dry spell, I would go there and relax on the bank of the brook and look at all the minnows and spawn that had been swept away from farther upstream. But when it had been raining, the entire area was flooded, so I couldn't even get to it, let alone relax on the bank. After so many years in Cub Scouts and Scouts, I learned the importance of keeping that area clean, and I did just that. I followed what I learned from scouting and left no trace because it was a beautiful area and I wanted to preserve it for my next visit. Well, that all changed when the other neighbor died and a family with young kids moved into his old house. Remember, this wasn't their property, but it was close to it. One day I went there and I found what could only be described as a war scene. The waterfall had been diverted, the brook had been dammed, and there were toys and plastic bottles and wrappers everywhere. I knew immediately this was the doing of my new neighbor's kids. This place of nature and peace had become the playground for a bunch of inconsiderate children. The minnows and spawn were almost gone. I saw buckets full of them, so my only guess is that the kids were collecting them and keeping them as pets. The most messed up thing I have ever seen is an area that everyone would consider beautiful and peaceful turned into a playground for inconsiderate children who could care less what they leave behind or do to it. I was bear hunting in a new area and hiking up a trail. There had been some traffic from the week before that I could see. I had made it around a mile when I distinctly heard a little kid sobbing the word "Mom." I froze. It was barely first light and there were no cars at the trailhead. First thought was a cat or something worse. I read far too much of this crap. I thought about leaving, but also thought, what if a kid and his mom went out and something happened? I called out several times, but no response. Must have been an animal, I thought. I continued working my way up the trail, chuckling at myself and thinking about how paranoid I am. I hadn't made it 50 yards when I heard it again, but louder. "Mom." I immediately started walking towards the sound and yelling that I was on my way and to wave their arms, because I can't see them. I stopped after maybe another 50 yards to listen. I hadn't heard anything back in response. It has to be a cat. I decide to wait and watch for a while. About 30 minutes go by and nothing. I'm thinking about how I need to get going and how stupid I am following something around like that. "Mom" again. My blood ran cold. It was very close and it sounded just like a little kid. I yell again and slowly walk ahead. I put my back against a tree and listen. Maybe another half hour goes by. Then right above me, "Mom," I dropped while pointing my rifle straight above me. I was shaking so bad, I can't see anything. I just keep looking and then the slightest breeze comes through. And again, "Mom." It was a small tree leaning into the tree I had leaned against. Every time the wind blew, it would make the sound. To get to the deer stand I sit in, I have to walk through a small path in the woods from the drive I park on, and then turn onto the field edge lining the woods. I walk the field probably 100 yards or so before I turn back into the woods, and walk in probably 40 yards to the stand. As I turned onto the field, I hear steps just inside the woods. Definitely something with 4 legs. Pitch black, so turn on my headlamp and look. Don't see a thing. Thinking my head is playing tricks on me. Start walking again, and whatever it is starts walking as well, step for step. Stop, look again. Nothing. This went on for about 50 yards and then it stopped. I kept going to my stand, not looking back, but kept a hand on my sidearm. Was bow hunting at the time. Didn't hear it again. Sat all morning and saw nothing. Went in for some lunch and it started snowing around that time. Came back out around 3, and as I start walking through the path to the field, I notice there are bear tracks along the path. and then veer off into the woods. Not sure if it was the bear pacing me or what, but definitely made my walk out of my stand uneasy that evening after dark. We do have some wolves in the area, but they are a rare sight. That's always in the back of my mind. On a recent expedition, I stumbled upon a most intriguing discovery. It was a script, not merely written, but etched into the very stone of a secluded cave. The ancient narrative it unveiled was a chilling tale, steeped in the rich tapestry of the region's Native American history. The tale unfolded with a brutal battle waged between two formidable tribes. The victors, a tribe renowned for their indomitable warrior spirit and keen tactical acumen, triumphed over their rivals. The vanquished tribe's settlement was ransacked, their possessions seized as trophies of conquest. Among the stolen treasures was a unique totem, an artifact of exquisite craftsmanship, imbued with an aura that seemed to hum with an unseen power. Elated by their victory, the triumphant tribe returned to their encampment, the stolen totem their prized possession. Their chief, a figure of formidable authority and unwavering courage, was particularly captivated by the totem. Script suggested it was said to house trapped spirits, but the chief, dismissing this as mere folklore, audaciously released the spirits within, a spectacle to entertain his victorious warriors. The jubilant victory feast, however, quickly gave way to a mounting dread. Grotesque apparitions began to haunt the tribe, their once tranquil nights transformed into a theater of horrors. A creeping madness, subtle at first, began to sow discord among the tribe members. Their once fearless chief, a paragon of strength and resolve, was tormented most of all. The spirits he had so recklessly unleashed had reduced him to a shadow of his former self. With the grim realization of his catastrophic mistake, the chief sought to rectify his error. Gathering a band of his bravest warriors, he embarked on a perilous journey back to the defeated tribe's territory. His intention was clear: to return the totem to its rightful place and make amends, hoping to placate the restless spirits and lift the curse that had plagued his people. The script, however, chronicled a tragic conclusion. Despite the chief's valiant efforts, he and his warriors never returned. His tribe, beset by the relentless hauntings and the insidious madness, gradually vanished. Their once bustling settlement was reduced to a desolate ghost town, a chilling testament to their fatal arrogance. As an archaeologist, this tale resonated deeply with me. It underscored the profound significance of respecting the traditions and beliefs of others. The tribe's downfall was a direct consequence of their haughty disregard for the sanctity of the totem. Their story, forever etched in stone, now serves as a dire warning to future generations, a poignant lesson in humility and respect. This story takes place about 4 months ago, when I scoffed at the existence of mysterious creatures unknown to science. At night, I was investigating odd sounds I was hearing. I looked around the area and found large claw marks on a tree. I concluded that this was a prank until I heard an ear-piercing shriek. I looked up, and suddenly, a reptilian creature flew above me. I quickly ran after it, but it disappeared into the night sky. Ever since, I've been hunting this beast, hoping to catch it. It was about the size of a tall human. Any idea what this creature could be? What should I use to lure it in? So I've seen a good amount of strange and unexplainable things in my life, but the most recent one happened after I last moved across state. I was in the habit of taking late-night walks, and everybody who does the same usually has a story of something interesting that they've seen. But one night I was walking along a jogging path. On one side, a bunch of housing areas, and on the other a large open field with woods on the other side from me. To give you a picture of this, there's short street lamps all along this path, and a good ways ahead are a few houses with the woods mentioned before running behind them. The woods being on my left side, the fence goes to them, then goes left as does the path. When I was just about nearing them, I saw a creature start running towards the woods from the corner of the fence. From where I was, it looked like a hairless, tailless, small humanoid that ran on all fours. It ran similarly to how a monkey or chimpanzee would run. Now we have plenty of foxes in that area. It was roughly the size of one, and I was a good distance away from it. But when it got into the woods, I heard all sorts of twigs and branches snapping really loudly, something a fox wouldn't do. From what I saw, it was sort of a peach or paler skin tone. I wasn't scared, more of just confused as to what I had just witnessed. It happened last year just before winter, and I haven't seen it since. This was in Missouri, if anybody is curious. I've lived in Idaho all my life and spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping, and my older brother and I would always hike up whatever trail we could find to get a view of the sunset. On one of these occasions, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite I only know as Warm River. The river there never freezes over, and my brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was an old tunnel bored through the mountain at one part of the trail, probably an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something I'll never forget. After walking through probably 2/3 of the way through the tunnel, I heard a terrible screech at the end we entered through. The screech wasn't like anything I'd heard before. I've heard the screams of animals on dark and windy nights. I even think I've heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never the metallic grinding screech I heard that day. The point is, whatever the sound was, it did not sound natural in any capacity. I probably jumped 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few choice curses before shooing me quickly to the exit of the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided we should just continue walking and head back after whatever made the noise hopefully cleared out. We didn't have any firearms on us, so I was pretty upset. My brother reassured me we would be fine, and we made the walk back without incident. However, I didn't get any sleep that night. Whether it was the thing that screeched at us or just my imagination, I heard things moving around the campsite the whole night, as well as whispers echoing through the darkness outside the trailer. I woke my brother up a few times to check out what it was, but he refused each time, telling me that it was probably just other campers staying up late and enjoying themselves. The rest of the trip was pretty normal. We packed up the following day, and my life continued as normal. I was disconcerted, but chalked what happened up as a harmless event that I must have been exaggerating in retrospect. A few weeks later, I went up to Pine Basin, an old ski lodge my family rented each year for family reunions. Here I would mess around with my cousins, our favorite activities being night games. We would play hide and seek, a game called Ghosts in the Graveyard, and other games like that. In one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game. Because I was one of the younger cousins, I got a flashlight as an advantage. Normally, all the younger cousins hid close to the lodge, and the older cousins hid in the trees or at the base of the nearby mountain. As I was searching at the bottom of the mountain, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint at our location. It sounded like someone was hiding way up near a tree, known as the underwear tree. You can guess why. So I began trekking up toward the whistle. As I climbed closer, I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continued on warily and convinced myself that I would be fine. I hated walking in the night alone, but figured whoever I find would walk me back to the lodge. As I neared the tree, I noticed that it was deathly silent. This alerted me that something was very wrong, because you could always hear the adults having fun back at the lodge. I was anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott." I thought the whistle was my older cousins. "Come back down with me." I got no reply, but I wasn't planning on waiting. As I began walking back down the path, I heard a voice call, "You almost had me." So I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light in the branches of the tree and saw a monstrosity that was not my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human with its emaciated figure and lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind. It had torn and stretched features. As soon as I saw the creature, I screamed, dropped the flashlight, and ran back to the lodge. The entire time I ran, I was overcome by an overpowering smell, and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp, I saw a few people, my cousins, at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking, and they took me inside. I told my dad what happened, but my cousins all said they didn't see anything following me. The adults kept us inside for the night, and I kept hearing sounds drifting in from the mountains. I never played night games after that happened and was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. Ever since that night, I have always felt uneasy up in those mountains. I used to be really religious and figured it was a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that. But those mountains have never felt the same after that incident. A few years ago, the game Until Dawn became really popular and I watched a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in the game, I got chills down my spine. It was exactly what I saw. And I did a ton of research on them. I figure someone must have gotten snowed in at that old lodge and resorted to cannibalism. But that doesn't explain what happened at Warm River. I still hear that screech from time to time. It never occurred to me until watching Until Dawn that they might be from the same thing. And it scares the hell out of me every time. I heard it earlier tonight, and that's why I decided to finally write my story down. When I was 16, I went out with my friends Jay and Harley to a large park with a lake and massive grass hills. It was already dark since it was winter, and we sat down to talk after finishing school. We were situated on a hill with a forest to our right and thick grass bushes behind us. While we were chatting, Jay, who was the loud one in our group, started whistling and shouting due to the echo it created. Suddenly, we all heard the same whistle back at us from behind the bushes. We were confused because we knew it couldn't have been the echo. Jay shouted at the sound to provoke it, which frightened me. After a while, something screamed back at us, faint but clear, making my heart drop. Jay then suggested we go investigate, and we followed him. As we walked closer to the bushes, we strayed off towards the exit passage, telling him we should leave. However, he claimed to see eyes and something darted at him. We all ran through the passage and Jay was screaming while me and Harley were in disbelief. Once we reached the road, we looked back and shouted Jay's name. After 5 minutes, he stumbled out of the darkness and fell to our feet. We walked away from there as fast as we could, not talking about what had happened. The next day we met up again and found out that Jay was covered in black and yellow bruises. I have no evidence to prove this story, but I wanted to share it nonetheless. In this case, it's not something I saw, but something I didn't see. Girlfriend and I were in the Tetons last summer when we had to make a pit stop near the end of our week-long camping trip. We turned into the Spread Creek campground area to get away from the traffic on the main road going towards Jackson. We found out later that our discreet pee spot was only 25 yards away from where Gabby Petito's body was eventually discovered. This was only a day after she was last heard from again, so she was likely already laying there. Felt horrible and helpless to learn what happened to her after the fact, especially since we were only a stone's throw away. Some friends and I had a fire up at Goat Mountain for the night, and we heard noises coming from all around us like something walking through the bushes. Whenever we would shine a flashlight in the forest, we wouldn't see anything and the noises would stop for a while. Then all of a sudden, a tree was pushed over onto our fire, putting the fire out, and when we shined the flashlight in the direction of the tree, a large black furry creature was walking quickly away, breaking branches off trees. I live in central Kentucky, and a couple years ago, I was working a temp job with UPS. During the Christmas season, they hire temp workers as driver assistants who ride along next to them and help run packages to doors. This was during December. We were driving around delivering to a rich neighborhood in rural Jessamine Co., Kentucky. Rich gated subdivisions out in the country are quite common here, and we sometimes spent hours in these places, no bathrooms, leading us to have to piss into bottles in the back. So just some context low. So it was December, and we're in one of these around 7 p.m. and it was already dark. We pull around this cul-de-sac, and his headlights are on and by the side of this house. It illuminates an animal I had never seen before. It was the size of a medium dog. Shortish gray fur, medium-length tail. It was slinking along the side of the house into the dark backyard when we saw it. It clearly did not intend to be seen. I was like, "Did you see that?" And the driver said it was the biggest possum he had ever seen in his life. This thing was the size of a medium dog. I can only describe it as looking like a giant ferret or weasel. I saw its head and it had the same snout type. We only saw it illuminated for 2 or 3 seconds, and it retreated into the darkness. Before anyone says it was a marten or a fisher, those do not occur in Kentucky and they never have. Edit, fissures may have occurred here historically, not even anywhere close. Those are Canadian and Northeast species, and I'm lifelong familiar with coyotes. It was not a coyote. Me, my husband, and our friend were walking up to Squaw Lake to go fishing because the road was still snowed in. We decided to hike. We were about a half mile from the lake when I noticed a footprint on the shady side of the road. I called Jake over and asked him who would be walking up here in their bare feet, and he said nobody, and I asked him to come over to verify what I was seeing. The footprint was well preserved in the snow. It appeared to have been a week-old print. The other prints weren't as well preserved and had melted in the snow, but still you were able to distinguish the tracks, but it was exciting none the less. Unfortunately, no pictures were taken. In the dense wilderness of Yosemite National Park, an unknown predator roamed free, having escaped from a secretive government facility. It moved with calculated stealth, blending seamlessly with the shadows of the towering trees. Its true nature remained shrouded in mystery, but its intentions were clear: to hunt and conquer. Meanwhile, in a fog-laden coastal park, Ranger Ray carried out his duties with unwavering dedication. The tranquil beauty of the mist-filled landscape was disrupted by whispers, eerie voices that seemed to materialize from the ethereal veil. Ray's senses heightened as the whispers grew more menacing, echoing through the damp air. He knew he was no longer alone. Within the mist, an unseen predator lurked, its malevolent presence growing ever closer. Ray's heart raced as he navigated the treacherous trails, his footsteps muffled by the fog. Suddenly, the creature pounced, its feral instincts taking hold. It bore an uncanny resemblance to a Sasquatch, but its eyes glowed a menacing shade of red. In a desperate bid for survival, Ray reached for his weapon, aiming to defend himself against the nightmarish assailant. A fierce struggle ensued, their bodies locked in a battle for dominance. Adrenaline surged through Ray's veins as he fought against the overwhelming force of the predator. With sheer determination, Ray managed to seize his gun, unleashing a volley of bullets at the beast. The creature collapsed, its lifeless body sinking into the damp earth. Relief washed over Ray as he caught his breath, believing the threat had been vanquished. But his respite was short-lived. Moments later, a group of men dressed in black arrived, their presence enigmatic and foreboding. They swiftly collected the lifeless creature, showing no concern for Ray's well-being. Before he could protest, darkness descended upon him as he succumbed to unconsciousness. When Ray awoke, he found himself disoriented and alone. The memory of the encounter remained vivid in his mind, but the men in black and the enigmatic creature had vanished without a trace. Questions lingered, but Ray knew that the truth lay hidden in the depths of secrecy. Me and my pregnant wife were staying at my parents' house in northwest Tennessee on September 17th, 2021. It is about 50 yards from our new house. I went out on their back patio to smoke a cigarette around 12 a.m. Over the fence I heard something that sounds like it was choking on something, but at the same time sounded like a distorted pig squealing. It would make sounds in about 2-3 second spurts. I honestly thought it was a hawk or owl. Anything that could be explained. I thought it was definitely weird, but probably natural. About 3 hours later, I couldn't sleep and decided I would go to the gym. As I'm walking to my car, across the yard, and towards the road, I hear this same weird sound coming from about 50 yards away at my 10 o'clock direction. I looked around and I couldn't see anything or hear anything. Then I hear, "Hey, hey," in a woman's voice coming from the same direction. So I looked back up and there was nothing there. As I'm scanning the yard, I hear that loud, squealing noise again. I got in my car and dipped as fast as possible. I thought it was weird, but didn't give it a second thought until a month later I was on TikTok and saw a video of a man riding a horse in Arizona, I believe. And in the video I heard a woman say, "Hey, hey." This makes him and the horse both freak out and run away. It was believed to be a skinwalker. When I heard that same voice and those same words, almost like a recording, my heart sank to my stomach. I really don't believe in any of this, and I've tried every way I can to disprove it, and I truly can't. It doesn't scare me as much anymore as it intrigues me. I am so curious to know what that was and why me. As a member of an elite Navy SEAL team, I found myself thrust into the heart of a covert mission with high stakes. Our objective was clear: dismantle a dangerous terrorist organization operating across multiple countries. We knew the risks involved, but we were trained for this. We were prepared. As we delved deeper into our mission, the true extent of the group's operations became evident. What we uncovered was far more sinister than we could have imagined. The terrorists had managed to infiltrate key positions within the U.S. government, compromising national security from within. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and trust became a precious commodity. With every passing moment, the clock ticked louder, reminding us of the urgency of our task. Lives were at stake, and the threat of a catastrophic attack on American soil loomed ominously. We were up against a web of deception, betrayal, and political intrigue. The true culprits hid behind a facade of legitimacy, shielding their nefarious intentions. We had to tread carefully, for our every move could mean the difference between success and failure. The enemy was cunning and well organized, leaving no room for error. We couldn't afford to let emotions cloud our judgment, even as doubts began to seep into our minds. We had to rely on our training, our instincts, and most importantly, our unwavering determination to protect our country. The mission became a relentless pursuit of truth, with each piece of evidence leading us deeper into the dark underbelly of the organization. We worked tirelessly, meticulously connecting the dots, exposing the silent saboteurs who had infiltrated the highest echelons of power. The deeper we dug, the more we realized that the threats we faced weren't just from outside forces, but from within our own ranks as well. Betrayal lurked around every corner, and loyalty was put to the ultimate test. We had to be careful who we trusted, even among those we considered comrades. The enemy was always watching, always ready to strike, but we remained resolute, our bonds as seals unbreakable. It was a grueling battle fought in the shadows, with lives hanging in the balance. We pushed ourselves to the limits, overcoming physical and mental obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Sacrifices were made, tears were shed, but we pressed on, driven by our shared purpose. In the end, it was our unwavering determination and unwavering loyalty to our country that prevailed. We exposed the true culprits, bringing them to justice and thwarting their plans for destruction. As the dust settled, we stood proud, knowing that we had protected our nation from the silent saboteurs within. But the fight was not over. The war against terrorism continues, and as Navy SEALs, we are ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. We remain vigilant, ever ready to defend our country against those who seek to harm it. Our mission is never truly complete, but with our skills, our training, and our unyielding dedication, we will always stand as the shield, protecting the land we hold dear. I was driving home from the night shift at my job in Pinkham Notch, New Hampshire, in the White Mountain National Forest. It was a half an hour's drive at around 10:30 p.m. I'm always on alert for moose and bears which can pop onto the road at any time. The night was foggy and wet. Suddenly, about 10 minutes from town, I noticed a movement next to my truck on the driver's side. It was a very large animal running alongside at an angle, as though trying to cross Route 16 from left to right. My truck was in the way of its crossing, and I swerved to avoid it. It was doing about 50 miles per hour, and I kept right up for about a quarter mile. It had a full coat of 6-inch long, silvery black and gray hair undulating, thrust its hind legs forward so fast it was a blur, and pushed its long front leg or arms under its body to propel. The head was tucked down in the dark. I maintained my speed, and the creature kept right up, not tiring at all. Then suddenly the movement turned into a hyper-speed blur, and it launched forward in front of my truck and jumped the guardrail near a stony brook to my right. It disappeared. It was not a bear. I have spent a lot of time alone, or with others in the mountains of New Hampshire and Maine with many large animal encounters. I never saw anything like this before. It opened my eyes that these Bigfoot beings are around, Now, as I hike the deep woods with my dog, I notice strange things like uprooted saplings, tree trunks and roots stuck into the ground upside down, carefully arranged identical stones and patterns on the path. I have feelings of not being alone. I quietly sing and deliberately think that I am simply passing through and I have no desire to mingle with or bother others on the trail. I travel with my dog and a loaded 9mm pistol, just in case. So far, I've been left alone. I bump into hikers on the Appalachian Trail and sometimes give them a ride to town. So far, no one has admitted to any encounters, but I always ask if they have noticed anything strange on the trail. I am Ayana, a young Native American woman deeply connected to the ancestral lands that have been our home for generations. These lands hold not only our history, but also the sacred essence of our culture and traditions. Our community has always lived in harmony with nature, honoring the spirits that reside in every rock, tree, and flowing river. However, our peaceful existence is disrupted when a corporation, blinded by greed and driven solely by profit, discovers valuable natural resources buried beneath the surface of our ancestral lands. They see our sacred land as nothing more than a means to accumulate wealth, disregarding the profound spiritual and environmental significance it holds for us. As news of their intention spreads, anger and concern ripple through our community. I cannot stand idly by while our heritage is trampled upon, so I rise as a fierce defender of our people's legacy and the land we hold dear. I understand that we must act swiftly and unite to protect what is rightfully ours. Gathering together the strength and determination of our community, I rally the elders, spiritual leaders, and other passionate individuals who share my vision. We form a powerful alliance, reaching out to environmental activists and legal experts who can aid us in our fight against the corporation's destructive plan. Our battle takes various forms, from peaceful protests and direct actions to legal battles and media campaigns. We amplify our voices, refusing to be silenced or ignored. We shed light on the corporation's disregard for the sacredness of our land, the irreversible environmental damage their actions would cause, and the violation of our rights as indigenous people. Yet, as we push forward, we encounter escalating threats and challenges. The corporation attempts to divide our community, pitting neighbor against neighbor. They engage in acts of sabotage to undermine our efforts and manipulate public opinion through false narratives and misinformation. But we remain undeterred, knowing that our cause is just and that our unity is our greatest strength. We stand firmly rooted in our ancestral teachings, recognizing the delicate balance between tradition and modernity. We strive to convey the importance of cultural preservation and the need to protect our land from exploitation, even in the face of economic development. Through our struggles, we strive not only to protect the physical land, but also to build bridges of understanding and respect between our community and the wider society. We emphasize the invaluable wisdom of indigenous knowledge and the urgency of adopting sustainable practices that benefit both people and the planet. Our journey is fraught with challenges, but we press on, fueled by a profound love for our land and a deep sense of responsibility to our ancestors. We know that our fight extends beyond the boundaries of our immediate community, resonating with indigenous peoples worldwide who face similar struggles. As the battle rages on, we continue to walk our path with unwavering determination, guided by the spirits of our ancestors and the hope for a future where the sacredness of our land is recognized, respected, and protected for generations to come. I have had a few experiences. One in particular literally raised the hair in my neck and arms. I love going out to remote areas. I used to travel pretty deep into the mountains and stay in an off-grid cabin in Tennessee. When I was there, I never saw another human. And when I say drive, I needed four-wheel drive to get there. The road was more of a path than a road, and a rain destroyed parts of it. The cabin had a small solar panel for a couple of small interior lights at night. It didn't support enough power to stay on, so I used candles and oil lamps when I was inside, and moonlight was the best. on nights that the sky was clear. I had an outhouse and always tried to be sure to visit it for the last time before it got too late. I had seen coyotes, heard mountain lions in heat, which will creep you out on its own, and seen bear scat. With that much going on, I really tried to use the bathroom for the last time each night before full darkness hit. One night in particular, I had the unfortunate experience of a full-on angry abdomen IBS attack and desperately had to get to that outhouse at 11 p.m. or so. It was very dark and the sky was overcast. Trees blocked any minor moonlight coming through the clouds. I had an old flashlight I left there, and I guess humidity got to it. It went out halfway to the outhouse, which was about 25 feet from the cabin. I already felt stalked with the light on, but didn't see anything around me when the flashlight was on. I figured I was creeping myself out. Then the light went out halfway and I felt so exposed. Again, I kept thinking I was just freaking myself out. I'm not a person who freaks out easily or gets scared easily. I have been through a lot in life, so it was really odd to have the sense I was being stalked. I really had to get to the outhouse. My stomach was not happy. I rushed to the door, fully focused on getting some relief, and as I grabbed the handle in the dark, I heard dry branches on the ground crack as something stepped on them. I smelled the mist foul smell I have ever smelled. I have pulled dead, rotting possum corpses out from under homes and smelled some major nastiness in my life. This smell, this made the hair in my neck stand up. I really had to deal with my stomach. The stupid flashlight would not come back on. I finally had some relief from my stomach and no new sounds had occurred while I was in the outhouse. I waited and listened and I heard nothing. My plan was to go slowly and confidently to the cabin. I had no idea what I was dealing with, but I was convinced showing fear would only get me attacked and or dead if I was creeping myself out. As soon as I opened the outhouse door, that foul smell was there and stronger. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. It was pitch dark out. I counted my steps and kept moving toward the cabin and let my breathing calm and to feel like something was right behind me. The smell was so intense it made me feel sick. I just kept going. I was nearly to the house and I felt the back of my hair move like someone or something swatted at it. I finally rounded the corner of the cabin and climbed the stairs. I got inside that cabin as fast as possible. I was beyond scared. Every single hair on my arms and neck were standing up. I looked out the only window I had and could swear I saw orange eyes glowing in the dark, staring back at me. I thought I was letting the fear and my being so tired play tricks on my eyes. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. They were still there. They were really high up. I thought, is that something in a tree? It would have been 7 or 8 feet tall if it was standing. Trying to make sense of it, I convinced myself it was something in a tree. The next morning, I went for a walk and go in a huge and very weird 3-toed footprint in some mud near the outhouse.